All right, worked on the Yerf Dog a little bit today. Back to the wiring. I ended up running the ground wire from the wiring harness on the Yerf Dog. I put an inline splice here, split it into two wires. One wire I have going over to an I terminal that I terminated here on the block, so that's making the ground connection to the engine. And the other wire goes over to the negative side of the ignition coil because that's where it's supposed to go. The starter circuit that energizes the solenoid and the kill switch both operate on the ground circuit. So basically, when you press the starter button, if the brake switch is depressed and you press the starter button, it basically grounds this connection right here. So 12 volts is always on one side of that solenoid coil. So I've got that temporarily just hooked up here. So if I ground, I got a quick disconnect I put here. If I ground this, it'll complete the circuit, close the solenoid, and crank the engine. We just want to test and make sure that our switches still work. I put the new, brand new, fresh from eBay switch, push button switch on the side here. So now if I reach underneath here and simulate pressing on the switch, brake switch. So now that's working. So now we want to check and see if we've got spark. So to do that, I'm going to disconnect my quick disconnect here so I don't have to deal with pulling on the brake switch and all of that crap, and do something much easier, which is just hook a quick jumper up to this and ground it, where's that red alligator clip I just had? So now I can just hook this jumper wire here. If I ground this, it'll crank. Aiden's going to hold the spark plug to ground and check the spark. No? Okay, so maybe we've got the ignition switch off. I don't know, flip the switch and see what happens. Ready?
Yeah. Yes.
You get a spark?
Yeah, but it's really faint.
Let me see. You sure?
Yeah. Positive. It's there.
Oh yeah, it's there. Would have thought that spark would be brighter. Alright, so theoretically, if we threw a little fuel in this
And put oil in it.
it should start. There is some oil in there, it's just not enough.
Where'd you put the oil in? Right here.
Yeah, that's the fill. Here, hand me that spark plug. I'll go get a spark plug wrench the right size. So we're noticing the spark seems pretty weak, and if I had to guess, I would say it's probably a direct result of the fact that this is cranking slow. So we don't have a battery we're running this off of. We're running it off of this starter charger. So I think that's probably what the problem is. See, it doesn't even have like enough oomph to turn it over now. See, bet you we'd have a better spark now if we looked at it.
Why?
Because it's turning faster. Alright, so what we're going to have to do is...
No, just spray that stuff in there?
No, I don't want to spray a lot in there. It's starter fluid. It's not really a good idea. Let's see if we can get it to puff. Pop. That's a good sign.
Yeah.
That's a good sign. So tomorrow, hopefully, we'll throw the carburetor on it. We'll put enough fuel in the carburetor so that it's in the bowl. And you should be able to run it off just the fuel in the bowl of the carburetor without even having to hook up any fuel tank or anything for a minute or so and see how it acts. But, I mean, that's a really good sign. All right, mosquitoes are biting. Let's quit for today. Well, we were hoping today was going to be the day that we could actually get a little bit of life out of this engine, other than just a little pop. So this carburetor, we were pretty sure was the original carburetor for this thing because, well, it is a GY6 carburetor, and it was on the go-kart. Even though the engine was out of the go-kart, this was hanging by the throttle cable. So that's what led us to believe it was the original carburetor. But we're kind of perplexed right now, or at least I am confused about what's going on here, because this little rubber boot right here, which makes the transition from the manifold intake elbow here and the intake on the carburetor, had this clamp on it already. But this carburetor also had a clamp on it that I took off, a small one, which is kind of weird because it was actually on the throat right here with nothing underneath it. So it wasn't like there was a broken piece of boot left on there. So if I go to put this carburetor in, I can't get this carburetor to fit without the bowl completely hitting this cross piece right here, which we know has to be there because it's the front support for the motor. So Aiden was just saying, well, maybe it has to go sideways, and the problem is, I said, yeah, sure, it fits sideways, but the problem is this is a conventional float bowl type carburetor. In other words, inside this bottom part of the carburetor, we know there's a float, and as the fuel comes in and fills this bowl, that float will move up and shut the fuel flow off into the bowl. If you mount it sideways, it won't work correctly. The question is something missing here? Is it possible that this rubber piece is not the correct one, that somebody else changed this? And is there supposed to be maybe something that has a turn in it so that this would sit more up like this? Still not ideal. Float wouldn't be level, or the bowl wouldn't be level, but it would probably still operate in this position, as opposed to where it's not going to operate correctly at all if it's completely sideways. All right, well, it turns out it does fit. It's just the clearance is so tight here, it's pretty funny. The bowl of the carburetor basically is going to be hitting this support right here, this cross piece. But it can fit, so I guess that's the way it is. So, all right, so we haven't done anything to this carburetor. It's got the broken, well, it's got the completely missing electric choke, and it's a whole nightmare. So I think before we put that, before we even try and start it with that carburetor, we should at least try and clean that carburetor.
Ow.
So I'll just take this out and give it a quick cleaning.
Need help?
All right, I'll clean it real quick. All right, now that we got it all cleaned.
And put new hoses on it.
Yeah, I'm putting new hoses on it. We'll reinstall it. Oh, actually, I got to put that clamp on before we do anything.
I have it over here.
Okay, this is the clamp that was on the old carburetor, like this, which makes no sense because this clamp is too small. This clamp cannot be opened up large enough to go over the rubber boot. So this was pointless. I don't even know what this clamp came from. And the clamp we just took off of here, Eden managed to break it. So we're gonna try this one here. Hopefully, it'll work. So to get the carburetor on, because it's such a tight fit, you gotta push it on. You have to push it on sideways, and then rotate it. That's how tight that is. So I don't know why they made it like that. It's a bad design. Alright, and before I started filming, I topped off the oil, so there's enough oil in the engine. We still don't have oil in the final drive, but I'm not going to put any oil in that just yet. I want to see if this engine's going to run. I think as long as this boot doesn't leak, we should be okay. Now I'm going to show you where this is the vacuum line that comes with the carburetor. and it's got a T, and I'll explain this. I'm going to reposition the camera and explain this in a second. All right, so over here on this side of the manifold, there's a nipple, and this nipple is the main vacuum port. So there's a vacuum developed here when the engine is running. Off of that, this line is attached, and it has a very lousy fit so that it leaks profusely. Well, that's just wonderful. You kidding me? That's a little bit better, but that's ironic. There's the one without the clamp on it. It actually fits a little bit better. So, see if we can't put this clamp on this side. That's a little better. Okay. So then that vacuum line comes up here and it comes to this T that's supplied with the new carburetor, and this T has a line that's capped off. What would go to this line is, in certain applications, I think particularly scooters that use the GY6 engines, this line goes to a vacuum operated fuel shutoff valve underneath the tank. There's a petcock underneath the tank that has the ability to automatically shut off the fuel flow when there's no vacuum detected. So my Suzuki Eiger ATV has the same kind of a system. It's got a multi-position knob that you can either shut it off, has reserve, it has on, like with the vacuum, and then it has like full on, which is it bypasses that vacuum circuit. Because if something goes wrong with that circuit, if you have a vacuum leak or whatever, you're not going to get fuel. So in this application, because we don't have that type of a valve on the tank, we just want this capped off. But you have to have this blocked if you're not using it, because if we take this cap off, obviously you're going to have a massive vacuum leak, and that's going to cause a problem for the operation of this other device on the other side right here, which is this doohickey right here, which I believe they describe as a anti-backfire valve. So this must, when it senses the drop in vacuum, there must be a diaphragm in here that closes off a port or something, and somehow helps reduce backfiring on deceleration. So if you're having a backfiring problem on deceleration, could be that you've got one of these valves and you've just got it bypassed and you're not using it. Or who knows, it could be another issue altogether. Not saying that's what's causing your problem, but it's a possibility. So right now, I'm going to leave the electric choke disconnected because we haven't sorted out all the wiring for that yet, and I don't want that to stop us from being able to run this thing today. So what I'm going to do today is we're going to just put enough fuel in the carburetor bowl to see if we can run it for a short period of time, and in order to get it started, I'll just manually cover this throat and basically recreate a choke. They call this an electric choke, but in reality it's an enriching circuit. It actually doesn't do the job of restricting airflow going in like a conventional choke butterfly. What it does is it actually uncovers a port that allows raw fuel to be sucked in and really richens that fuel mixture. And the way it's supposed to work is that when electricity is applied, when 12 volts is applied to this, it actually will allow that raw fuel to go in there, and then as the engine heats up, this is supposed to sense the heat from the engine as it warms, and then close and basically lean up that mixture. So for right now, let's see, this is the bowl drain, so we should probably route this so it dumps fuel right on the hot muffler.
That's probably how it cut up on fire.
Sounds like a plan. All right, and then there's the fuel inlets on the side here. There's no hose attached to it right now, and that's okay because we're just going to squirt some fuel into there. So what I want to do now is I want to get my, I have that little squirt bottle. We'll use that. We'll put some fuel in there. We'll put it right in here.
Didn't you leave that in a boat?
Yeah, I did. So that's where your next trip is going to be. All right.
Think it's full?
Yeah, I think so. Seems to not want to take anymore, so I think it would be safe to go on the assumption that the bowl, the float has come up and closed the needle valve.
How bad did that carburetor look like?
I didn't even open that carburetor up because it looked really bad. And the biggest problem with that one is the electric choke. This piece is missing to it. And if we bought the electric choke online, it might not come with everything that's missing. And then we'd end up being screwed. And the electric choke was about half as much as it cost for this whole carburetor complete.
Yeah.
This carburetor was really cheap. Probably got it's probably worth exactly what we paid for it. I don't know. We'll find out.
For this engine, it says 150.
All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and use my hand to choke this thing. Hopefully we left that switch in the on position.
What switch?
The kill switch. Do you remember one position we had no spark and then we flipped it? I don't know what position we left it in.
We left in.
Go ahead. Tell me. Yeah, you think on. I tell you what, you got a 50-50 chance of being right. Because it's either on or off. We're about to find out. So, what we're going to do is, when I tell you to, you hit engine start. Hit it again. Okay, doesn't seem like anything's happening. Why don't you flip that switch and let's see. Ready?
Yeah.
Hit engine start. Okay. We're gonna have to check for spark so we can figure out whether or not we've got that stupid switch in the right position. Well, this is still hooked up, so yeah, it should be working. All right. I'm gonna check for spark. All right, hit the switch. That's spark. Okay, that's spark on right there.
Maybe if we do this, Daddy. Can we do this?
So you shouldn't look. If you look at the switch, it's down.
Yeah.
So it's backwards of what you would expect. In retrospect, we could have probably installed that switch 180 degrees the other way, but it is what it is.
Is that a good way to put it so it doesn't get wet?
Yeah, I guess.
That's a weird way to put this engine. Do you think they made this engine just for this thing?
I don't know. Oh no, they made the go-kart for the engine. The manufacturer of this go-kart probably said, hey, we can get this 150cc GY6 motor design. They already make a ton of these for these Chinese go-kart scooters and stuff. We can get these cheap. Let's build the go-kart design around it. I smell gas on the plug, so something's... Are you gonna reset that, or are you gonna play with your phone?
Reset. It works.
Yes, what up? I don't like how it's stopping so quick.
Okay, it's reset.
Wow. That doesn't seem right. You see how when it stops, this thing like stops dead.
So what's wrong?
I don't know. Okay, try and reset it.
It is.
No, you're gonna say that, and I'm gonna do it, and then they're just gonna say it's not, and you're gonna be like, oh.
Was.
All right. Maybe it's out of fuel. It's not seized up. Maybe it just ran out of fuel already.
It's like your boat
Where's
behind you.
Okay.
Can we keep that connected to it?
Well, this isn't much of a tank.
Okay, ready.
Yeah, I see it.
Never put the nothing there.
Okay.
We couldn't find it.
I just wanted to see if it would stop when I turned the idle down low, and if it did, it probably just ran out of gas. But it looks like, well, it looks pretty good actually.
So we just need to order throttle people in the plastics.
Yeah, well, yeah, a new fan, the plastic shrouds, throttle cable, some kind of an air filter.
There's a small one you can buy for it.
And then we should think about reconnecting up the battery and the installing that regulator and getting the electrics so that you could start it off with a push button switch, put a spring underneath there for the brake switch.
Order that all today?
Well,
Why?
we'll see how much money you have. All right, that's it for today.